lot of us, potential does not pay attention to your prayers. It actually distracts you.
There is a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death. Times the bravest thing you'll ever do is leave. Times the bravest thing you'll ever
drain me. The truth, when you heal, the people who...
Welcome back to another episode of Truth, Trust, and Trajectory with yours truly, your girl, Nchukym Bee, where healing meets transformation. This is the space where we stop running from our truth, we start trusting our own voice, and we walk boldly in the trajectory that is meant for us. Before we dive in, I want you guys to take a second and subscribe. Share this episode with another sister who is in her healing season, and visit my website, nchukymbee.com, for all of my healing resources. I have everything from guided workbooks to one-on-one coachings and readings. The link is in the bio, and it will also be linked down below in the video. Today's video, it's a deep one. We're talking about what it means to feel someone's energy even after they have left your life. The spiritual, physical, and emotional ties that linger long after the love has ended. I'm going to share a really special, not so special, chapter in my life, my experience with someone named Shay, a relationship that taught me the difference between connection and attachment, between chemistry and captivity. So if you've ever had someone's energy linger around you like smoke, and if you've ever known that they were near before you even heard them, this episode is specifically for you. When I first met Shay, it felt like the universe had finally given me someone who saw me. I had came from a relationship previously before where I felt like I was constantly begging to be chosen by that person, right? And so when this person came in, it felt like a wish fulfillment. He was definitely very charming. He was magnetic, and he said all the right things. At that time in my life, I was craving to be seen and to be chosen. We had this instant connection that felt very spiritual. But as I look back, it wasn't spiritual at all. It was indeed trauma. We were both broken in our own ways. We were both chasing comfort and the familiarity of chaos. I remember how our highs felt electric. It felt like our souls were dancing, and our lows felt like a war. The arguments, the accusations, the silence that followed, it was, in fact, very emotionally violent. Yet, every time that I left, I always came back. And every single time that I came back, I lost a little bit more of myself. That is what a trauma bond looks like. That's what it feels like. What it does is it actually tricks your nervous system into believing that pain is passion. There was a period when things got really dark, and I mean spiritually dark. I talk about it in one of my earlier episodes on Truth, Trust, and Trajectory. The day that he strangled me with the intention of taking my life. And somehow after that, I still found a space to forgive and allow him back into my energy. After that, he started showing up unannounced. He would walk past my house at odd hours, even shared a story with me one time after we broke up and got back together about how he slept outside of my window and slept on my porch, even thought about breaking into my house. Sometimes he would stop outside and talk loud enough so that I was able to hear him. He would never say my name, but he would know or make sure that I knew that he was outside. That is what still shakes me to this day, because I could feel him energetically before I even heard him. My chest would tighten up, my pulse would shift, and my energy would sink before the sound of his voice could even hit my ears. It was almost like my intuition was screaming, he's near, he's outside, he's nearby. And within minutes, there he was outside of my house, walking by, trying to make friends with my neighbors so that he had a valid excuse to be on my block. Some nights I would sit on my couch or in my bed frozen. My heart would start pounding out of nowhere. And I would begin to think, how did he even know? At that particular time, I thought that it was love. I thought that that level of energetic awareness meant that we were where we were meant to be. But later, I learned that the truth of the matter was it wasn't love. That was hypervigilance. My nervous system had memorized his energy, every tone, every vibration, every shift in the air. There's a book that ties in directly to this episode. It's called The Body Keeps the Score, and it explains that trauma isn't stored as a story. It is stored as a sensation. Your body is always going to remember what danger feels like, even when your mind tries to forget. So, what my body was actually responding to before my brain could even process it was those energetic fields, that connection that I thought was love. That is how deeply entangled we were. So when people ask, why didn't you just leave? Or what is it going to take for you to finally get it? I'm now able to tell them sometimes it's not that easy, because when you have been trained to equate pain with love, silence feels unsafe and peace feels foreign. I didn't need him anymore, but my body tricked me into believing and thinking that I did. So the body always remembers. When I finally started my healing journey, I picked up The Body Keeps the Score. And coincidentally, I was reading that book when he and I first met. I was actually listening to it on Audible. And I remember reading the book and crying so intensely because it's almost as if I had this realization that I had been betraying myself, even though in that moment I was in the process of betraying myself again. And after reading that book, it was like seeing my reflection for the first time. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk says the body keeps a score. If the memory of trauma is encoded into your body, it needs to be processed by your body. And that is when it truly clicked for me. I wasn't heartbroken. I was literally somatically stuck. If you guys are new to the whole trauma and somatic healing, I have a trauma mini series here on my channel. I will link it at the end of the video, and you guys can actually check it out. Watch the whole mini series. It was really, 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 really informative. My nervous system had been on high alert for so long that even after Shay was gone, my body stayed in survival mode. Every time I heard a voice that sounded like his, I was triggered. Every time my phone lit up, I started exerting mass levels of adrenaline and cortisone. I was no longer around him and in his presence, but I was still living through him. And that book, The Body Keeps the Score, taught me something very powerful. It taught me that healing is not about forgetting the trauma. It's about teaching the body that the danger is over. What that meant for me is that I had to rebuild new patterns of safety and how I breathed, how I moved, and even how I talked to myself. I started practicing grounding every single morning. I listened to the high frequency guru to reset my energy, listening to positive affirmations, and even focusing my attention on things that are going to be beneficial to me in the long run. I would sit with my hand on my heart and whisper, "You are safe now." Some days my body didn't believe it, but I kept saying it until I started to. I literally had to retrain myself to learn that peace does not mean boredom, it means regulation. Love doesn't have to feel like survival. It can feel like stillness. The Body Keeps the Score gave me a language for what my spirit already knew, that healing is not just emotional, it is biological. And that's when I stopped chasing closure from Shay and started giving closure to my own body. So now I want to talk about spiritual entanglement. And I want to be brutally honest with you guys. The energetic part of letting go, that is literally a whole different kind of welfare. Welfare versus warfare. Make no mistake. Because even after my body calmed down, I could still feel him. I was still dreaming about him. I would have moments during my waking day where I would have flashes of memory, about him, sometimes in the middle of my meditation. And that intrusive presence that whispered was like, I'm still here. In that moment, I would still feel my heart racing. And it wasn't from fear, but it was from familiarity. And that's what spiritual entanglement does. It confuses your intuition. It makes you think that the energy is a connection when it's really interference. So I had to start discerning between spiritual alignment and spiritual residue. I started to learn to ask myself, do I feel God's peace in this moment, or do I feel anxiety and obsession? Because God's energy will never make you anxious. Shay's energy wasn't love trying to come back. It was my spirit calling me to finally let. So I started cleansing, not just my house, but my aura. I wrote his name down and I burned it, not out of hate, not out of disdain, but as a declaration of freedom. That was my way of giving me permission to finally let him go. I prayed over Psalms 91 in my home and over my energy. I said, Lord, please release me from anything that is not sent by you. And every time that I felt his presence trying to creep back in, I would speak out loud. You no longer have authority here. Rewiring and rebirth. What does that look like? For me, it was healing from Shay. And it taught me that letting go isn't a one-time event. It is a practice. We were together for almost a year. And I knew initially when we first met that that was not my forever person. And I knew because I would give myself personal tests saying, I'm not going to invite him into my space for a certain period of time. And I think intuitively it was because I knew what type of energy or entity he was carrying around. But it was like when he was in my space, it was so difficult to get rid of him and to purge him from that space because he latched on to me, and the healer in me saw someone that was depleted or deficit of love. So I thought that I would be able to fix that. I thought that I would be able to heal that by being present, by being accessible. But I learned the hard way that's not a thing. The first layer to this was physical. So I had to make a definitive decision to block his number and to completely cut access and to change my locks. The second portion of this was emotional. So I had to unlearn how to not be addicted, how to be addicted to the chaos. I had to unlearn that because with him, it was always chaos. There was always an issue, always a fight, always an argument, always an accusation, always something where I felt like I had to defend myself against him. I had to protect myself against him. And then it was a cycle because he would put me through that and then I would put him through it. And it was back and forth. It was like a game of ping pong. And the final layer was spiritual. Because even after you have deleted the pictures and you've moved on, sometimes their energy still lingers in spaces between your thoughts. And that's where you have to learn how to do the deep work, the breath work, the prayers, the journaling, and the somatic releases. I started treating my healing like a ritual. Morning check-ins, questions I would ask myself, how does my body feel right now? And then I would go to midday awareness. What am I holding that is not mine? Is it fear, resentment, guilt? And then evening release. What is it that I need to return to God before I rest? Over time, I started to notice something. My intuition was becoming clearer. My dreams stopped being haunted and they started returning. I remember there was a time where I was trying to set a clear boundary so we weren't consistently right up under each other, which didn't go to my liking because he got offended. But, I let him know, like, when you're over here constantly and consistently and we sleep together, I'm literally forgetting my dreams. My dream recall went from 100% to 50% to 0% in a matter of months being with him. And that's when I knew that something wasn't right. Because in a lot of my videos, I talk about the importance of dreams, especially for me. That's how I get my downloads and my messages. It's how I get clarity on certain issues that are going on in my life. It's how I get messages and tell me what I should be doing or how I should be moving or what I should be focusing on. And so laying next to someone and completely losing your ability to dream or losing your dream recall, for me, that's scary. That is a huge red flag. So with this, I no longer needed his energy to feel alive because I had finally become my own safe space. A lot of my episodes that are coming out, they're going to be more on the shorter side because I don't want to overwhelm you guys. But I feel like this is a really heavy topic, and a lot of people don't necessarily talk about the aftermath of breaking up in a very toxic dynamic, right? And some of the things that we have to do to start rebuilding not only our sense of self, but our safety or our perception of safety. And that includes a lot of the things that how we handle ourselves and, what we expect from others. One of the things that I started working through was setting my morals, my goals, and my values. What is my core mission in life for myself, right? And I think all too often, when we get stuck in these situations where we feel like we can't necessarily escape it, right? Or we're using people pleasing tendencies as a reason to stay attached to these entities, we ultimately stop looking at if we're equally yoked with these people, right? Are they aligned with us in our higher mission or our life goal? For me, honesty, transparency, and trajectory is important. That's why I named my podcast Truth, Trust, and Trajectory, because I live by those things. Even if it's hard, has to be truth. Because otherwise you're just living in a life of illusion. You're not living authentically. And sometimes that truth looks like I have no business being with this person, or, this job no longer aligns with me, or something feels wrong or off. But I think out of fear, sometimes we choose the most common path instead of least resistance. And when I say the path of least resistance, I mean it was easy to stay in a dynamic that, even though it was causing emotional damage, right? And that was my own choice to stay stuck in that. Had I made the right decision and decided, hey, this is not aligned with my highest and greatest good. This doesn't align with who I am as a person. And so maybe I need to let it go, because letting something go when you have an emotional attachment to it is difficult. It's hard. But guess what happens if you don't? You're going to meet resistance every single time. I talked about earlier in this episode about how many times we have broken up because intuitively and spiritually, I knew that this was not my person. We were not aligned in that way. But the realization that if I had to actually stand on that and hold myself accountable to what I already knew meant that I would have to sit in the discomfort of being alone. And a lot of us choose that. We choose that, right? We like to play victim and blame it on the other person, when in fact, the outcome of your life is your responsibility, right? You are only responsible for your own happiness. And I learned that from him because I thought that I was doing all of the things that he wanted me to do, that he needed for me to show up, until I realized that it would never be enough, right? I had to make him happy to my own detriment. That is not love. That is insecurity. I'm going to move into the fifth segment of this video. I'm going to do breath work and an affirmation with you guys. So I want us to ground ourselves. So if you're driving, just listen. If you're home, get comfortable. Make sure that you uncross your legs and unclench your jaw. And I want us all to breathe together. So the first step is going to be to inhale through your nose for 4. You're going to hold your breath for 2 and exhale through your mouth for 6. And then again, inhale peace and exhale the past. This time, imagine every piece of energy that is not yours. Imagine it floating away like smoke. And then I want you guys to take one more breath. This time, visualize it clearly. Inhale safety, hold, and exhale the fear. You are safe and you are free. Now, I want you guys to affirm this with me. I release all energies that no longer serve me. My body remembers, but I teach it peace. My spirit is clear My home is protected. My heart is free. I am no longer bound to what broke me. Take one last deep breath in through your nose, hold it, and exhale slowly. That's release. And that is the rebirth. So I want to thank you guys for joining me today on Truth, Trust, and Trajectory, where healing meets transformation. If this episode spoke to your soul, please make sure you guys share it with a sister who's learning how to detach from her past. Make sure you guys remember to subscribe, rate the show, and visit my website at Nchukym to explore more tools, coaching, and readings to support your healing journey. And before I let you go, sis, I know what it's like to love deeply and still lose yourself. I know what it's like to feel someone's presence even when you have locked the door. But I also know this: you can reclaim your peace. You're not crazy for feeling energy. You are simply learning how to interpret it. Your body is wise, and your spirit is sacred. And your peace is proof of that. Until next time, breathe deep, protect your energy, and keep walking in your truth and trusting your trajectory. I'm your girl, Nchukym Bee, and this is where healing meets transformation. Okay, bye. For a lot of us, potential does not pay attention to your prayers. It actually distracts
There is a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death. Times the bravest thing you'll ever do is leave. Times the bravest thing you'll ever
drain me. The truth, when you heal, the people who